Whether you spend most of your free time on social media, reading, or watching TV or movies, there's a good chance that you have been a part of a parasocial relationship. A parasocial relationship is a one sided emotional bond with a real or fictional public figure. Parasocial relationships emerged as a psychological phenomenon alongside the rise of mass media through the 20th century. As media have become more individualized and siloed into the 21st century, the nature of parasocial relationships has fundamentally changed. Whereas 30 years ago, there were only a handful of public figures with whom we could form parasocial bonds, today more than ever, people have the option to seek out public figures who are closely aligned with their interests, values, and ideals. But what are the consequences of these bonds? And how do they interfere with our real life personal relationships? In this video, we're going to examine why we develop parasocial relationships with public figures, whether these relationships are helpful or harmful, and what their broader societal implications might be. Parasocial relationship is a one sided emotional bond with a public figure. It could be a celebrity, actor, podcaster, influencer, or even a fictional character from a book or TV series. In parasocial relationships, the public figure is largely inaccessible to the individual, and there is little to no reciprocity in the relationship. Although celebrities may interact with their fans on social media, or they might even say they love their fans or supporters, it's not the same kind of emotional investment you'd see in reciprocal two-way relationships. Parasocial relationships aren't necessarily romantic in nature. They can be based on desired friendship, emotional support and guidance, or admiration. For example, someone who didn't grow up with a father in their life may develop a strong parasocial bond with a father figure from a television show. Or a teen who is struggling with self confidence might feel a strong connection to a YouTuber who talks openly about mental health and self esteem. It would be natural to assume that the concept of parasocial relationships emerged alongside the rise of the internet. However, they were first written about in a 1956 psychiatry paper. Quote, one of the striking characteristics of the new mass media, radio, television, and the movies, is that they give the illusion of face to face relationship with the performer. We propose to call this seeming face to face relationship between spectator and performer a parasocial relationship. The authors emphasized that the emotional bonds people felt with radio, film, and TV stars often felt very real. And if we consider the media landscape prior to the 21st century, meaning no social media and no paparazzi in the way it exists today, it was very rare for audiences to get glimpses into the private lives of the public figures they admired. And there were only a handful of public figures who were widely known compared to today due to media being centralized and controlled by a few major networks and studios. Popular targets of parasocial relationships in the 20th century included the Beatles, Walter Cronkite, Mr. Rogers, characters from long running soap operas, and early reality show cast members, like from the original Real World series. The rise of the internet, social media, and celebrity culture changed the landscape of parasocial relationships in that they gave audiences unprecedented access to the private lives of public figures and created the potential for two-way interaction. These blurred lines between public and private life served only to enhance the salience of parasocial relationships. Further, as media have become increasingly diffuse and individualized, parasocial relationships have become more niche. Although there still are public figures who transcend media silos, today more than ever, people have the ability to seek out celebrities and influencers who are closely aligned with their interests, values, and ideals. The available data on parasocial relationships reflects this. with a recent study reporting that over 50% of people have at least one current parasocial relationship. And if you account for the fact that people may feel embarrassed or worry about social judgment when admitting to a parasocial relationship, the number is likely even higher in reality. Most commonly, parasocial relationships are reported with real life figures such as YouTubers, influencers, celebrities, and musicians. The second most common were TV and film characters, followed by cartoon and anime characters. Now on to the billion-dollar questions. 1, why do we form parasocial relationships? And 2, are they helpful or harmful? Let's start with the first question. There are two primary theories to explain why we form parasocial bonds. The first theory is that parasocial relationships act as a substitute for real life relationships. This theory suggests that people who are lonely, experience social anxiety, or for whatever reason lack in person connection may form these bonds due to an inability to establish reciprocal relationships. The second theory is that parasocial relationships are, psychologically speaking, similar to our real life one on one relationships. They develop through repeated exposure, emotional resonance, and perceived intimacy, just like real life connections. And they fulfill similar social and emotional needs, even in the absence of two-way interaction. The 2020 study examined 120 studies spanning 40 years that all looked at psychological factors related to forming parasocial relationships. By synthesizing results across all these studies, the researchers were able to determine that there are very little data to support Theory 1. In contrast, they found substantial data that support Theory 2. Specifically, across all these studies, the researchers found no statistical relationship between social deficits, which includes things like chronic loneliness, poor self esteem, social anxiety, and having a limited social network, and parasocial relationships. If parasocial bonds primarily serve as a substitute for real life reciprocal bonds, then we would expect to see a statistical relationship between these two things. The fact that we don't means that things like chronic loneliness and social anxiety are not primary explanatory factors that drive parasocial relationships. Second, their examination revealed that the same three essential factors that drive our desire to form reciprocal bonds also drive our desire to form parasocial bonds. These factors are perceived similarity, friendliness and relatability, and physical attractiveness. The fact that we use the same characteristics to select who we form reciprocal and parasocial bonds with suggests that it's probably the same or similar underlying mechanisms that drive both. Lastly, the researchers found that parasocial relationships predicted the intensity and consistency of media consumption featuring the target of the parasocial relationship. This pattern mirrors what happens when reciprocal relationships form. We want to spend more time with the other person. We want to stay up to date in their lives and just overall maintain our connection with them. And so, the takeaway from this meta analysis of the research on parasocial relationships is that largely they are an extension of our existing reciprocal relationships versus replacements for them. This isn't to say that parasocial relationships can't develop under less healthy psychological conditions. Research has shown that people who have an anxious attachment style may be more likely to form parasocial bonds. Beyond that, there are certainly examples of individuals taking parasocial bonds to dangerous levels that aren't based in reality. However, these cases represent exceptions and are not the norm. Many people form parasocial bonds. Very few of them represent a danger to the target of their admiration or affection. Parasocial relationships don't stem from a place of extreme shyness or loneliness. They develop for the same reasons that our real life reciprocal relationships develop. In parasocial relationships, these benefits can include perceived companionship, emotional support, inspiration, or guidance. And individuals report feeling understood by the public figures they connect with parasocially, especially when those figures share similar values, interests, or struggles. Parasocial relationships also have their downsides. First, when a person is in a parasocial relationship with a public figure, they're more susceptible to manipulation by that public figure. For example, if a celebrity wants to sell something, spread misinformation, or gain power, they can capitalize on their audience's emotional tie to them, making their audience more likely to take what they say at face value and less likely to critically analyze the message. Second, parasocial relationships can lead to blurred lines between true and perceived intimacy, making the audience member feel that they really know the target of their parasocial relationship better or in a way that's unique from other fans. This can lead to obsessive behavior and dedication that can lead to further psychological distress if the public figure behaves in a way that's perceived to be out of character. Lastly, these relationships can lead to very real and genuine feelings of disappointment, loss, and grief. When a public figure becomes involved in a controversy or simply steps back from the public eye, the feelings of betrayal and emptiness can feel very real. It's important to recognize that parasocial relationships involve significant emotional investment on one side with little or nothing in return. When that connection dissolves, the resulting void can feel especially isolating or even existential. This isn't to say that we should avoid relationships due to the potential for psychological distress, but rather to acknowledge that parasocial bonds create a launching pad for these feelings where they might not have previously existed. These feelings can leave an individual devastated, especially if they don't have the socio emotional tools to navigate such intense feelings. Broadly speaking, parasocial relationships as they exist today blur the lines between healthy and unhealthy. The constantly shifting technological landscape moves faster than research can keep up with. This puts researchers in a position where they have to apply what they already know about human psychology and communication and try to anticipate what's coming next. Just as the advent of mass media brought with it a new type of human connection, artificial intelligence is poised to do the same. What were once very clearly one sided and imaginary relationships are now increasingly interactive, dynamic, individualized, and emotionally persuasive. AI powered tools are capable of mimicking human conversation and cultivating an illusion of reciprocity and companionship. People report genuine feelings of optimism and comfort after interactions with AI. The more realistic the emotional bond feels, the more porous the boundary between reality and illusion becomes. If we combine the power of AI at harnessing human connection with deepfake technology, the line between reality and simulation will only fade further and lead to really difficult questions about authenticity, consent, and the fundamental nature of human connection. At their core, parasocial relationships are not inherently good or bad. It's their unprecedented intersection with our ever changing technological landscape that's leading us into this uncharted territory. The question of whether or not parasocial relationships are real has clearly been answered. They're real. What remains to be seen is the extent to which our brains have the capacity to differentiate real from illusion when they're virtually indistinguishable.